fellow Dragonstaffers, and welcome back to another Dragonstaff tutorial. In this video, we're going to be covering a fun one, and that is the actual matrix. Before we jump into this one, a huge thank you to all of you supporting on Patreon. Thank you for making videos like this possible, and thank you for making this channel possible. And there is going to be two major prerequisites for this one. One is an Andre matrix, which most of us think of as an actual matrix. And the second prerequisite is a trick that I referred to as a matrix back roll. And I have tutorials for both of those tricks. I will put a link down in the description below. Another optional prerequisite is it'll be very helpful if you know these in-spin traps or inward traps. These can serve as a really nice entrance into your matrix. And also, as usual, for tricks that can be done on either side, we are just going to be covering one direction for this tutorial, just for the sake of keeping things simple and saving time. I always recommend drilling it on the opposite side once you've gotten it down on the first. We will be coming into our matrix from the left arm or left side and exiting more or less down the right side. So, what do I mean when I call this an actual matrix? So for the longest time, I was under the impression that this was a matrix. And I think most of us do think of that as a matrix, and it looks a lot like you're kind of making that movement kind of from the movie The Matrix, so I get it. But I've heard time and time again people tell me that this is actually an Andre, which I think, to avoid confusion, best to call it an Andre matrix. So this is what I've heard referred to as an Andre or Andre matrix. And what is an actual matrix is almost a combination between an Andre matrix and the matrix back roll that I put a link to down below. And that looks more like this. And doing it with the extra pivot at the back kind of allows it to be more accessible as a continuous trick rather than just doing one Andre matrix. It's easier to do a continuous actual matrix. So I'm going to first talk about the pathway a little bit, and then we will go over it step by step. So throughout this trick, the contact point on the staff is going to remain in the center, or at least the center few inches or so. And the pathway, if you think of the center point as being a little race car and your body as being a racetrack, this is the pathway that the race car will be taking. First, the center point, or the race car, will be traveling towards you up the inner arm. It'll travel across the front of the shoulder and armpit to enter onto your back, just like in a typical matrix. And then once the center point has reached your back, it's going to do a donut on top of the back. So basically making a 360 so that it'll start to roll towards the right side again. Only once it's rolling towards the right side, we want to raise the right arm to encourage that center point or race car to travel across the right armpit towards the right side of the chest so that we can sneak the top of the left hand underneath the center point as the center travels from the back across the right shoulder or armpit, which will allow us to either do another matrix or an Andre matrix or whatever you like. So that is basically the pathway that the staff will be following. First, I'm going to go over the trick facing the same direction as you. I will quickly go over it again, facing forwards, just to make sure that you can see everything. And we're going to come into this trick very much how we came into our matrix back roll, which is why I listed that as well as the Andre matrix as prerequisites. So if you don't know the matrix back roll, please do go and watch that first if you need further instruction on it. So we come into our matrix back roll just like an Andre matrix, only we let the center point do that pivot at the back, preferably at the upper back. And then if we were doing a matrix back roll, we would let the center point roll down the right arm. And that's where this is going to become different. We do let the staff do that pivot at the upper back, only instead of letting the center point travel down the top of the shoulder, down the arm, we want to raise the right arm so that the center point has to take a different path, and that path is across the right armpit, really the underneath of the armpit there, so that the center point will be rolling ideally up high at the chest so that you can sneak the back of the left hand underneath the center point to come right back into another matrix or Andre matrix or matrix back roll, whatever you prefer. So to break this up into 3 parts, first part is our matrix back roll. Entering the matrix, allowing the center point to do the pivot at the upper back. Part 2 is going to be raising the right arm so that the center point travels across the right armpit towards the chest. So part 1, part 2. And right there, you may have seen it was really low, which is why you want to try to keep that center point up high as it travels across the chest, so that we will be set up for part 3. Part 3 is sneaking the back of the left hand underneath the center point as it travels across the chest, and then leaning to your right side. And then from there, it's choose your own adventure. Another actual matrix or an Andre matrix, matrix back roll, whatever you find from there. So part 1, part 2, part 3. Basically, part 3 is coming back to our starting position. And just to briefly go over that again, facing forwards in case you couldn't see any of that, we started with part 1 being our matrix back roll prerequisite. Center point travels up the arm, across the front of the left shoulder, onto the back. Center point does a 360 at the back. And then we're at part 2. We raise the right arm so that the center point travels across the right armpit towards the chest. I know it's hard when it's all slowed down, so I'm trying to give you some real time as well here. Part 1, part 2. Which leads us to part 3. Right there as the center point's traveling across the chest. Sneak the back of the left hand underneath the center point. You can extend the left arm out to the left. Staff should be rolling up the left arm just as we started the trick. That is part 3, coming back to your starting position. And from there into whatever you like. Now some quick little tips that I can offer for this trick because I do consider this a difficult one. One is stretching is going to help a lot. I think of whether it's an Andre matrix or an actual matrix, I very much think of it as either one of two yoga poses. One is triangle pose, and then forward bend, and then triangle pose opposite side. And that is keeping the legs straight. If you don't like keeping the legs straight throughout the matrix, then you can do a very similar thing but with the knees bent, and that would be extended side angle pose, forward bend, extended side angle pose on the opposite side. So whether you want straight legs or bent legs, it is also very helpful to have a wide stance, and you don't always have to turn the feet out as you go through each side of the matrix, but I find that it is helpful to really kind of lean into it and go for these wide lunge kind of yoga poses. So those help me a lot, as well as I already mentioned, trying to keep the center point up high, whether it's the pivot at the upper back or coming across the chest. You can see right there, I kept it up really high, and that makes the trick flow a lot more easily. It has a lot more momentum, and it's further away from the ground so that hopefully it won't drop or hit the ground. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for the support, and I will see you very soon.